Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest aliens and UFOs video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do another scary encounters video here. This one yet again coming from the reddit.com website. They're from the subreddit called The Truth Is Here. I mentioned this is a scary encounter because basically it happened to a father who was telling this story to his son about the UFO that they witnessed. Not only that, but this UFO almost seemed to stalk them to make sure that they wouldn't tell anyone. Plus, he was able to tease another very scary encounter, not with a UFO, but with something else that sounds so good to tell, but unfortunately, at least in the case of the father, he doesn't want anyone else to know about it for fear that there may be reprisal. So it's up in the air to see what he was referring to. But yes, let's go ahead and let's share this particular encounter here, and then I'll give my own thoughts on it afterward. It comes from a user by the name of KamiGoffGF, and they've titled it, "I'm the only one my father has ever told." So let's go ahead and let's share all their information here. So here's essentially what they state. Between the two of my parents, I have always been closer with my father. He's warmer, more in tune with his emotions, and has always shared similar interests and beliefs in me. Not to say that I don't appreciate and love my mother for her stoic pride and strength, despite her coldness. Anyways, one day a few years ago, I was driving with my dad in his truck, swapping stories with him. Since he's my dad and he was there for most of my stories, it was mainly him telling me about stuff from his younger years. I'm a huge cryptid fan. Bigfoot, Mothman, Chupacabras, you name it. So naturally, I asked him if he's ever seen anything strange or had ever experienced the paranormal. It started out lighthearted, talking about weird shadows he'd seen and the fact that he believes in ghosts and aliens, which my mom doesn't. And so once he mentioned aliens, I told him about the two encounters I had had. And after that, after I told him this info, he seemed off. He was quiet for a few minutes and then he said, "Don't tell your mom I talked to you about this. She thinks I'm lying and will get upset if she knew I told you." So of course I tuned in big time. He told me he looked dead into the eyes of something not from this earth or planet of existence. And so one night, many years ago, him and his buddies were out driving in his old pickup. We're from the deep south, so he was just driving through endless woods and fields near his uncle's house. They were chatting and driving until they saw it. He said it all happened in a matter of minutes, but felt like it was hours, like time felt drawn out and non-existent. And so he slammed on the brakes. A giant saucer-like machine was silently hovering just above them and directly in front of them on the road, entirely still and motionless. He said that that was one of the most scariest parts, that a machine that huge and that intricate, covered in impossibly bright and vibrant lights made of material nearly incomprehensible in texture and shape, could make no noise at all. And so around the entire craft in a band-like shape, he could tell was some kind of a one-way mirror or window. Now he couldn't see into it, but he could feel in his bones, in his core, that something was staring him right in the eyes. He was paralyzed from it. He felt entirely unknown. He didn't know how, but he knew in his gut that whatever was looking at him knew his entire past and everything about him. It knew his name, and it had known him for a long time. He said it was like he was in an unwanted staring contest with God for what felt like hours. And then it flashed away over in the tree line in a blink of an eye, impossibly fast. He checked the clock, and only a couple of minutes had gone by. So he and his friends were horrified. They collected themselves and full speed drove to his uncle's house to ask his aunt and uncle if they saw it. And they did. They were pale in the face and acting very off. Moments later, it appeared in a tree line by their house, and it sat there still for a couple of minutes, almost daunting and threatening, like a warning to mind their business and that they will be watched. And then it was gone, never seen again, and he and his friends and family agreed to not speak of it again to each other to help themselves sleep. And so the worst was actually yet to come for him, though, because in a separate story that had nothing to do with UFOs like object, He told me this one afterwards. And so he stopped himself, and I had to coax him into telling me. I promised I wouldn't call him crazy. He had never even told my mother this story. This second story chills me to the bone. It makes me afraid that my family is being followed by something we don't understand. I know it's true too, because my dad is extremely jovial and lighthearted. And when he told me this story, he looked like a scared little boy. He teared up and looked visibly shaken. Mind you, I've never seen my dad scared or ever even cried before, but my dad made me promise I won't tell anyone this second story. I have to keep it until my grave. He's afraid that if I speak of it, it will make cryptic things start happening around him and I. Again, I'm sorry for being such a tease with it, but I can't speak of it. I haven't even told my boyfriend of 2 years. Not a soul until I die. I only mention it so you know what my dad told me was true because of what he saw out there in the field by his uncle's house. I can't help but wonder if my family is specifically being followed/watched by someone or something. It would make my personal experiences with the paranormal and unexplained make more sense, but I will never know for sure. So the TLDR version is my father had an encounter with an otherworldly being that was in a UFO-like machine, and for the rest of his life experienced odd things, one of which he has only ever told me and promised me not to tell anyone until I die because it was that intense and cosmically horrifying. And then that's it. That's everything that the user mentioned with regards to their encounter. So let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. First off, this is one of the few where it didn't really happen to the user per se. Instead, it happened to their father. And the way that the father was telling him, obviously he gave a lot of details about it, and they were already open to that type of information. I mean, the user was pretty much a big fan of stuff like Bigfoot and chupacabras and UFOs. And then they alluded that something had happened to them as well. And then that opened up the father to talk about his experience. Man, how scary would that be, right? He's right. If you see something that large, that still hovering in the sky, and for it to be dead silent, that would be so offsetting. That would be something where it's almost like it's surreal whenever you see it. It reminded me of the fantastic but truly scary movie called The Fourth Kind. Don't know if you've seen that one before. I highly recommend it. But there is a part there where it showcases footage. This is recreated footage, but footage nonetheless of a giant UFO hovering above the main person's house and then flying off. But the fact that it did so silently, it was so big but so silently, was what stood out. And that's what it reminded me of when I was hearing this story here. And then talk about having a stalker UFO. How scary is that? No, this thing followed them as they went back to their aunt's and uncle's house. And then there it was, basically out there, and he absolutely knew that whatever it was that was inside this UFO was staring him dead center. As he mentioned, it knew him, it knew his experiences, it probably caused some of those experiences, and was telling him to shut up, like to basically keep his mouth shut when it came to anything involving talking about those things. And so talk about how that's a first whenever it comes to my channel here, like when it comes to a UFO basically stalking someone after their initial encounter. That second encounter, though, that one really piqued my interest. I wish they would have talked about it, and I wish they would have shared it, but as you can see, it was definitely a story that went into a whole other level. The only thing I could think of, and this is just pure speculation, is that it would have involved, speak of the devil, the close encounter of the fourth kind, and that would have been something where he was actually visited by whatever these things were, and they probably created such a horrible experience for him. And unlike other stories, where people seem to forget him or are purposely made to forget. In this case, he seems to have remembered everything. And the fact that he doesn't want their child to talk about this anymore into the future to make sure that nothing like this follows them afterward, that shows the whole other level that they have when it comes to the secrecy associated with this, but that's just my best guess when it comes to this. And if anyone has any more guesses, I'd love to hear what that is. I don't think it was anything else like paranormal or other type of things. I think it was still UFO related, and the only other thing beyond seeing a UFO that's more intense is having to do with an encounter of the fourth kind. But that's pretty much it. That's everything associated with this experience. If anyone wants to share any other comments, anything else I missed, then please post those comments below. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.